Welcome to the SysAdmin Show, the podcast that explains everything sysadmins do and the technology they work with. I am your host, Dustin Rebrick, here to give a jumpstart to your IT career. Today is show episode 33, Arbitrary Update, New Computer, Lab Rebuild, and PowerShell Automation. Well, hey everybody, and welcome back to the show. It's been quite a while since I've done one of these arbitrary updates, but also just kind of sat in front of the microphone and recorded an episode. Lately, a lot of these episodes have been either kind of the audio stream from the YouTube channel where I've done some lab episodes, or most recently an interview where I talked to the PowerShell in a month of lunches guys, and that stuff's really cool. But also, I kind of like just sitting here and talking through by myself and seeing what's going on. So I am doing something a little bit unique here. I am live streaming this episode to YouTube at the same time. It'd be interesting to see if anybody picks up on that stream and maybe jumps in the chat. I have no idea what to expect from that, and it may go horribly wrong, and I'll just take it down right away. We shall see what happens with that. So there's a lot going on, but I just want to talk about what's been going on. So the biggest thing for me is I got some new hardware. So I have been struggling lately with the 10 plus year old computer that I've been working with to produce this podcast, as well as do all the video stuff I've been trying to do on YouTube. And it got to a point where it was enough pain to justify buying a new machine. I'm pretty cheap. Even being an IT person, for whatever reason, I don't like spending a lot of money on IT hardware. And I'm not a gamer, so I don't really have a reason to constantly be buying top-of-the-line gear. But I did it. So I want to run through what I built and to talk a little bit about why I got what I got and how it's working out. So the machine I'm on right now, what you're hearing me through, as well as what if you're on YouTube, what you're seeing me through is an AMD Ryzen 5, and it's a 3600. So if you look it up on CPU benchmarks, it gets about just shy of a 20,000 CPU benchmark score, which my previous machine was somewhere around a 7,000. So this is significantly more power than I had before. And I was debating heavily between the 3600 and the 3600X, but I could get just a little bit more performance if I got the X model, but it wasn't worth the extra 30 or 40 bucks. I really didn't need that extra performance. So went the cheap route as usual and got something that's really exactly what I need, but was also cost effective. Along with this, I got 16 gigs of RAM, 2 8 gig sticks of DDR4. I think they're 3200 gigahertz. Yeah. Megahertz. 3200 megahertz is the bus speed on those. I got a GeForce GTX 1060. It's a 6 gigabyte card, and that was necessary because of the video editing. I was really having issues with the video editing, and it would stutter when I was trying to kind of scroll through and cut pieces out, and it was just too painful. I was getting sick of it, and I really needed a decent card to do it, and now it's actually really smooth with this new card. And for those that may be wondering what other software and hardware I'm using outside of that, because those components basically make up the new computer. I already had a 1 terabyte Intel, nope, that's not right either, a 1 terabyte Samsung SSD, and the Evo, it's just the Evo model, it's not the Pro. And so I brought that in, and I already had the case, or I bought a case for 50 bucks, whatever it is. It's nothing really special. Cheaped out on that. And I already had a power supply laying around. So I didn't really need any other components. I just needed those main things. And the motherboard, again, I'm not sure exactly what it is. It's an Asus. I've used Asus in the past. I really, really like them. And that's serving me well. It was like maybe 80 bucks. It could have been around $100 for the motherboard. It was really inexpensive and didn't have a lot of options, but it works perfectly for what I need. So all in all, this thing is exactly what I needed. It's working really, really well. I'm happy I upgraded. I think I spent about $400 on the new components altogether. and well worth the money. So as far as other components, I'm using Adobe Audition CC. That's what I'm recording this podcast on right now. And that is the kind of a monthly membership with Adobe. That's the only product I have with them. So I just pay for that one app. And that's how I record and edit and kind of produce the podcast. I use DaVinci Resolve 16 to do my video editing, and that's actually a fantastic free, it's not open source as far as I know, but it's free video editing software. And I have only used it a couple of times to do full-length kind of lab episodes, but it works really, really well, and the performance is good now that I have the new machine. To do things like I'm doing now with the YouTube live stream, I use OBS. I think it's like Open Broadcast Studio or something like that is what it stands for. And that lets me put up various screens and kind of switch between views of a live video of myself and the desktop and title screens and stuff like that. And my camera is a Nikon D7200, and the microphone that I speak into is a Behringer XM8500. So I don't know if I've gone over all of that equipment before, but that's the basis of the equipment that I'm now using to produce and bring the podcast to you. And I'm finally at the point, because it's really easy to continue to want to improve and buy more stuff. It's really easy to get distracted by that and spend more time doing that than I do actually recording content, which could explain why it's been spotty lately. So this is really good. I don't need anything else, and I'm making an agreement with all of you that I will not try to upgrade equipment for a little while, and I'll just focus on recording new episodes. So let's see how we're doing here. Let me just check something really quick. That's interesting. Okay, I am recording. I just wanted to verify. Somehow my panels got switched around here, so I wasn't sure if I was actually recording to Audition or not, but I've got a lot of windows open. So let's talk about what I'm doing in the lab. I've taken the server. It's a HP G6 server that I actually at one point was trying to use as my desktop, because I was, again, cheaping out and trying not to buy a new computer. So I figured I had this server, had lots of RAM and a bunch of, a couple Xeon processors. Maybe I can make this work. And I threw an older video card in that, and it was actually slower than my 10-year-old computer, because the Xeon processors may have a lot of overall power combined with multiple cores, but the actual clock speed of each individual core was lower, and that was making things like audio and video editing feel a little slower to me. So I'm putting that back to actual lab use, and I've installed Server 2019 Data Center Core on that machine. And my plan is to keep that as the Core edition and use it as my more or less Hyper-V box. I did attempt to install Server 29 Hyper-V edition on that initially. That would be nice because I wouldn't have to get a evaluation license. I could actually get it. The full license for Hyper-V server is free, and then I would just have to do evaluations for the VMs on top of it. The problem was I really wanted to try out deduplication technology, which is now well supported in Server 2019. And the Hyper-V server does not include that technology. I found that out the hard way after getting it all installed and set up, and I couldn't enable it. So went for round 2 and installed Server 2019 Data Center Core, and was able to get my deduplication going, and it works really, really well. So what I've done is I've taken a 500 gig SSD. That is my server, my lab server SSD. I just have one of them. And I have basically partitioned out the first 100 gigs to be NTFS and the OS. and then the rest of it, somewhere in the high 300 gigabyte range, to be ReFS, which I have not played with yet, but now I'm getting started. Microsoft's new ReFS file system, and on ReFS, I have enabled deduplication. And now I've dumped a couple of VMs on there as I'm starting to build up some Linux boxes and some more Windows 10 box, some server 2019 boxes, VMs on there. And what I'm getting so far is somewhere around a 49% dedupe ratio, because I have so many editions of the same thing on there. It's pretty awesome. I think I've already saved 30 or 40 gigs of data in dedupe. So this is my answer to what I was using before, which was, what was it? What's the Hyper-V technology called, where you can basically create, I think it's differencing disk is what it's called. I may be incorrect on that. But basically you set a master image, and then on top of that, you set it and configure it, and then you turn it off, and then you never touch it again. And then you can build VMs that build on top of that. So you save that core OS image storage size. And that's what I've always done in the past. And I wanted to get away from that and try to do something a little bit more robust. So this should be pretty cool. So far, the performance is decent with a handful of VMs running, but not great. So I'm wondering if that deduplication technology is costing me performance. I'll have to wait and see as I get going. So that's kind of what I'm doing with the server. And I've taken my old desktop, that 10-year-old server or desktop I was talking about, and I've created a second Hyper-V server. And so I'm going to try to run them potentially in parallel. One's AMD, one's the Xeon actual server hardware. I don't know if they're going to play nice together, and I'll be able to do live migrations. Historically, I was not able to do live migrations between different CPU manufacturers, but I'm definitely going to try. So on top of that, I am trying to do as much as possible with script-based infrastructure deployment. So I'm trying to get to a point where with the VMs on these new lab hosts, if I can actually use scripting, scripting, PowerShell, whatever it is, to completely deploy and configure a VM. So, have it install a base image for me, and then give it a name, give it whatever hardware I want it to have, 1 or 2 or 3 virtual NICs if I want it to, give it whatever it is that I want it to have, DHCP, static IPs, that kind of stuff. Go ahead and search for updates and reboot as needed. Maybe add services like DNS, DHCP, promote to a domain controller potentially, all that kind of stuff. What do I have to do to automate some of that, just to see how far I can get with it? So that's one of the things I want to try to play with in the lab with this new Server 2019. The next thing I want to do is some cloud integration. So I want to build up this environment and then see if I can get a hybrid cloud environment going. So I want to get Active Directory locally, and then maybe get a small Azure AD environment going, and then make a hybrid link between the two and get some more experience in the cloud. I've mentioned recently that I want to get more cloud experience, and that's one of the ways I'm planning on going about it. Another thing I want to look into is containers. And containers I knew nothing about. In the past week or so, I've been researching it more. And primarily Docker is the direction that I'm thinking I'm going to go with containers, is trying out to make some Docker containers or images, whatever you want to call it, nodes. And what I've noticed is that it really has nothing to do with the way that I work in IT. I'm not supporting a web-based company that deploys software via the web, and that's really where Docker shines, where containers shine, is building web apps and that kind of stuff. So I still want to play with it and start to get my foot in the water and see what it can and can't do. But from what I've seen so far, there's no value in deploying containers in my current environment. I'm not going to be deploying containers instead of VMs for applications like Exchange or file server or anything like that, or any of my business line of apps. It's just not going to make sense. So I still want to get get a little bit more familiar with it and at least make a couple of Docker images or containers, whatever they are. But I don't see myself going too deep into that based on what I'm seeing the technology is. On top of that, I do want to look into infrastructure automation. And this is kind of what I'm trying to do with PowerShell and scripting, but using an actual project or one of the more popular products to do this. And the two that I'm looking at this point are Ansible and Puppet. And these are very popular in the DevOps world, and they do kind of lean towards containers and all that, which I'm probably not going to get into with them. But they actually do look like they have some value for infrastructure automation and the kind of stuff that I would want to do and improve on in my production environment. So I'm not sure right now. It seems like Ansible may be a little bit easier to get started with out the gate. Puppet may be a little bit more heavier lift. So if I don't have a lot of time to play with them, I'm probably going to start with Ansible and see how far I get. But that's the kind of stuff I'm looking at. And is that going to be more efficient than trying to build up everything with custom PowerShell scripts? Can I do some of this heavy lift with a product like Ansible? And then finally, I'm looking at PowerShell automation. And again, this is kind of in parallel with what I'm now looking at doing with Ansible and Puppet. So what have I been doing lately with PowerShell? Well, especially since I just did that last episode with the PowerShell guys at Microsoft, I have been spending some time revisiting some old scripts and finally getting around to writing some new scripts that I've been meaning to write for quite some time. So one that I'm not quite finished with it yet for all the functionality, but removing users has been a pain point for me. And it takes about 15-20 minutes to remove a user that has been approved for removal. But I would like it to be as automated as possible. So that's my goal, is to make this an automated process based on some information that I would put into Active Directory. But until I get there, right now I have a manual process working. And I have a script that I run, and it asks me to put in their last name, and I can put in kind of all or part of their last name. It searches all users to see of the disabled users if it can find a match. When it finds a match, it spits out their kind of account information. From there, it asks for their username, their SAM ID. I type in their username, and then it begins. The rest of it's automatic. So what it does is it makes a backup copy of the email account in PST form, and then verifies that that backup was actually written, and moves on to then removing if the Skype account, if they have a Skype account, it removes their phone system account. If not, it moves on, and then it removes their AD and email account, again verifying that the PST file was actually written to disk. And then it sends an email of all that activity to me and a couple of other admins. And that's it. It's done. So I've taken what used to be about a 15 to 20 minute operation and made it less than 5 minutes, and it's pretty cool. So my goal is to get comfortable with that and then take that to the next level and fully automate it so that all I have to do is disable a user and make a note somewhere, a value in Active Directory, and then this script scans Active Directory on a daily or weekly basis for that specific key phrase and disabled accounts that are past a certain age since they've been modified, and then it'll automatically disable those accounts. I may never enable that automation. It depends how comfortable I get with it, but that is the direction that I'm heading with it. All right. On top of that, I've created a report of disabled users. So just trying to keep on top of cleaning up accounts. This thing spits out all of my Active Directory users that are currently disabled. It cleans it up for a couple of system accounts that are always disabled but are never removed because they need to be there, and spits that out in an email form to the IT admins. I've created a server uptime report. This queries all of the servers on a list in the environment and finds out how long they've been powered on for. And that lets me make sure that I'm catching all of my servers, not only for reboots, but for patches too, because if they haven't been rebooted, they have not been patched. So that's kind of cool. I've created a report for And this one I had before. I just kind of updated the way it was emailing me for server free space. So this is reporting every server again that's on the list. It's reporting how much free space it has on every drive. It enumerates whatever drives are there, the C, D, E, whatever is available. And it shows me how much free space and kind of breaks it out not only by how much space is free, but also a percentage of free space. And when it gets above 80 to 90%, that's when I start to take action and give some more free space to that VM. Or if it's a physical server, I have to do an actual hardware upgrade. All right. And then in the future, that's what I've got going on so far. In the future, what I'd like to do next is look at Windows updates. And right now, all of our Windows updates are a manual process. And I really don't like Microsoft's scheduling process where you can tell it to install updates automatically and then reboot at 3 a.m. I'm sure that that would work for certain VMs where they're not as critical. I wouldn't do that for Exchange, and I'm not going to automate Exchange either. But there are a handful of VMs that I would consider less critical than things like file servers and Exchange and my phone system. So what I want to do is create a script that will enumerate them and see what updates are available for them. And this is all coming through WSU, so those updates are already approved anyway. And then install the updates at a certain time, and then reboot, and then kick out a report of what was updated and if it was successful or failed, that kind of thing. So I've given an attempt at this once before and had no luck. Kind of just got stuck in the weeds with it. So I'm going to give it another try and see if I can make a go at it. And that would save me a bunch of time for weekly maintenance. And then I could use that maintenance time to do more advanced tasks. All right. That is it. And that is the extent of this arbitrary update. It was not meant to be anything more than just kind of a quick update about where I'm at and what's been going on. I am interested in doing more interview style podcasts as well. So Manning has reached out to me. They're the ones I did the last book podcast with the PowerShell guys, and they've reached out and asked if there's anything else I'd like to do. And so we're currently discussing what authors they have that maybe would work well for the show. I don't want to bring in things that aren't going to be good for the audience. So I'm looking at basically infrastructure, networking, security, cloud, that kind of stuff. That's the kind of stuff that I want to talk about. So if any of you would like to potentially be a guest on the show, feel free to shoot me an email, dustin@sysadminshow.com, or find me on LinkedIn. Again, dustin@sysadminshow.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. And I would be happy to talk about it with you and see if I think it'd be a good fit. And speaking of the last episode, Manning had given me 4 codes to give away, and I've had 3 people reach out and ask for them so far. So I still have 1 free ebook code for any Manning ebook. So if you are interested in that and you're listening to this, shoot me an email, dustin@sysadminshow.com, and let me know that you are interested in the free ebook, and I'll get you that last remaining code. And as always, I want to hear from you. Questions about your education, career, technology, or any ideas for future episodes, or just feedback, or just to say hi. Let me know you're there. I'd love to hear from you. Again, connect with me on LinkedIn. I was doing Twitter for a while, and it's just really not a place that I get to very often. So I'm on LinkedIn on a regular basis. I like that platform. It just makes a little bit more sense for me. So you can find me, dustin@sysadminshow.com on there. And until next time, I encourage you to never stop learning.